So thank you. Thank you for coming. My name's Theo Smith, and I work at National Institute of Health and Care Excellence. But I'm not specifically representing them today. I'm actually dyslexic, and I associate with ADHD, and I take a real interest in neurodiversity generally, but certainly within the work context. So today we're going to talk about neurodiversity at work. I guess the way that I label it is prisoners, vagabonds, superheroes, and Albert Einstein. I also use prisoners, vagrants, vagabonds, and Albert Einstein, but hopefully that'll all become clear as we start to go through the presentation. So, what is neurodiversity? So ultimately, neurodiversity, simply put for me, is diversity of thought. But what happened about probably a year and a half ago is I attended an event with the Resourcing Leaders 100 down in Whitstable, and I came across the term neurodiversity for the first time. Now, that was a big eye-opener to me, because even though at 21 I found out I was dyslexic, when I went to university as a mature student, and even though I'm now looking at my daughter and my son and thinking around the challenges they face within school, I start to think more around what else is going on in my brain. And I start to associate more with ADHD as well as dyslexia. But it's the first time I recognised that neurodiversity, which is incredible, is like an umbrella term for dyspraxia, ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyscalculia, Tourette's, and that actually you can have more than one, which was like a real explosion of a moment for me. And that over the last year and a half, I've been going on a journey, both with schools, within academia, within my organisation, and with groups, societies, people who want to get involved in having a debate around what neurodiversity is and how it fits into the workplace. So I was sat at a big event called Wreckfest, and I was there with a guy called Mills. Now, Mills is the CEO and founder of a company called Tapping. He did a great presentation earlier today, and we were sat in a tent, chill-out tent, relaxing, and I turned around to Mills, and Tapping effectively provide careers content to Generation Z, specifically across universities. He has over 1,000 micro-influencers and thousands upon thousands upon thousands of students who tap in to listen to their careers content. And I said, hey, Mills, wouldn't it be fantastic if we could ask your community, right, do they know what neurodiversity is? And he was like, yeah, we'll just do it now because they're Gen Z, right? They'll respond. So he did exactly that. He asked them, do you know what neurodiversity is? Now, these are the future leaders of our organisations. These are the people at university who are going to go into professional jobs over the coming years, right? And they came back, do you know what neurodiversity is? 17% said yes, and 83% said no. So we're like, okay, that's interesting. And I mean, they were coming in thick and fast. So all these stats were changing and evolving, but the final stats, this is where it sat. So I then thought, this is great, we've got to do more of this, right? So the next question we asked is, would you identify yourself as someone that's neurodivergent, right? And 16% of them said yes. So 16 say they identify as being neurodivergent, 17% of them know what neurodiversity is. That leaves 1% that's not neurodivergent or neurodifferent, depending on your preference for the term. That's 1% who aren't neurodifferent, who know what it is. Now, for me, that's the telling stat, right? Because we look at these Generation Z, these are the people coming through at university, switched on people. They don't know what neurodiversity is. Okay, so we need to do something about that. That's important. That's why we start today, because if they don't know and they're switched on, we got an issue. And the reality is that 1%, they probably have brothers or sisters or mums or dads or friends who are neurodifferent, right? So that's why they know about it. So the reality is, if you're not neurodifferent, or have a friend or a brother or whatever it may be, you probably don't even know what neurodiversity is. And my wife turned around to me and said, yeah, but why is it important, right? Because they'll know what ADHD is, they'll know what dyslexia is, they'll know what autism or Tourette's is. And I said, well, actually, yeah, they may think they know, but they won't understand that there's an umbrella that sits above them that means you can be more than one, right? And that we have complex brains. And neurodifferent means thinking completely differently to the rest of the population, right, to being atypical, that's what they won't know. And that's why we have to make the shift, and we have to kind of lift the lid on what neurodiversity means and how powerful it can be, and what that percentage of possibly 15% of people can do in the workplace. So the final question we asked them was, do they think there's enough awareness? 95% said no. So that's the good thing, right? People think there should be more awareness. So all in all, right, and I look back to myself as, you know, as Generation Z, although I'm a long distance away from that, you know, you just feel like another brick in the wall, right? You're just another person, another number. But the reality is, if you're neurodifferent within academia, within school, the chances are you're going to be either pushed to the periphery because you're quiet. If you're a woman and you've got ADHD or autism, you might be quietly working your way in the back, and, you know, they'll forget about you because you're not bothering anybody, you're just getting on with your work, so you won't be identified. Or if you're like me and you're at school, where I failed most of my GCSE, stopped turning up, I was smoking about the age of 11, drinking, because for me, that's how I was able to engage in school. I couldn't really get what was going on, I couldn't concentrate, I couldn't understand what was being taught to me, I felt frustrated, so I disconnected. So you've got two big risk factors here. You know, we feel like we're just another brick in the wall, but actually those people who are neurodifferent are not, right? And there's a big risk area here, which is they can have years and years and years of mental health challenges, of feeling disconnected from society, and that then is a barrier for these people ever getting into work. So there's a big serious risk for us. But whilst I was failing early on in my career, and I'm just one person, whilst I walked out of school with no GCSEs, and I went into college, and I managed to fail that as well, managed to screw that up after 3 years, 6 months towards the end, I started to realise there was problems, and a few months before the end, the head of the college turned around and went in front of everyone in a hallway. Remember, it was like it was yesterday. And she said, "Theo, you've not handed in that assignment. I'm failing you," for the whole BTEC National. And everybody said, "Theo, I can't believe you just didn't walk out." But I thought, you know what? There's no way I'm walking out of a year and a half plus of my time invested into my education. Just because they're not going to give me a piece of paper doesn't mean I'm not going to stay. And this is what we've got to understand. But and the reason why I tell you this is because what we have is we have those people who are struggling within that environment, but actually outside of that environment, they're potentially being very successful. So I was leading youth theatres for the whole of Wales. I was headed up youth theatres for all of Wales, part of this big institute at the time where we were running events. I was performing for the Queen. I was a saxophonist. I was performing on stage, doing all kinds of wonderful things. So on the outside of academia, I was being rewarded. I was in newspapers. I was being put in positions of responsibility because I could do something incredible. Within school, I was stood outside the headmaster's office. I was disengaged. I was causing problems. So this is what we've got to realise. This is what we've been creating, not just within our education system, but we then create this within our work environments as well. So why is this important? Why do we need to think about this now? Well, according to Harvard Business Review, how long does it take for humans to categorise others? Have we got any ideas? So who thinks 10 minutes? 10 minutes before we categorise others. Any takers? No? 15 seconds? Yeah, we've got a few. It's going up. 150 milliseconds. Okay. 40 minutes. I mean, you're lazy, really lazy if you're taking that long to categorise somebody, come on. So humans categorise others in less than 150 milliseconds. Within 30 minutes, we've made lasting impressions on people, right? And the reality is you break that 30 minutes down, within your organisation, some of the people you work with, you may only have 30 actual minutes with them in terms of engaging with that individual over months, 6 months, right? So you're having little snippets of somebody, and you're making the lasting impressions over a period of time. But by the time you get there, you can't go back, right? But 150 milliseconds, if we think around interviews and assessment, like, there's all kinds of biases going on there. And the other thing we need to think about is 84%, loads of stats out there, but I like this when it ties it all in. 84% of autistic people in the UK are not in full-time work. So let's put, you know, all the other varieties of work that the government would have you believe that everybody's in work now. But the reality is people are not in full-time work. And people who are autistic, 84% of them are not, but they would like to be, right? they've got something to offer, and it's around their mental health. It's around our mental health, right? We want to be in work, we want to provide society, we want to have self-worth and value. So this is why we need to do something about it. And the National Lottery, I've not put them in there because they're doing some incredible work around neurodiversity. Maybe they are. But actually, the reason why I put them there is because it is a lottery, right? The stats show, there was a study done in Chelmsford Prison, 53% of the prisoners were diagnosed having dyslexia. They've done a similar test in a prison in Texas. They've done one in Sweden, in Norway. They've done them all over the world, right? All the stats are clear. That what you've got is you've got a lot of people who are illiterate, but actually you've got a high proportion of people who are dyslexic. So the way I look at this, if you are dyslexic and you're from a working class background, and I'm making some assumptions here, but hey, you know, I think I'm fair to make these connections. If you're from a working class background, from a tough area, your parents are unlikely to challenge your school around the way that you're struggling within academia. They're probably disconnected, don't have the confidence to do it. What's going to happen to that child as a dyslexic? Well, they're going to find other ways to succeed. How are they going to succeed? Well, maybe they'll become entrepreneurial criminals, who knows? But if you've come from a good background, and it's not everyone, not every entrepreneur is from a good background, there's plenty of examples of people who've come from tough backgrounds, but you've got a better chance of being this guy here. So for me, it's a national lottery. We need to take effect. We need to shift the dial. We need to do something about it so that we don't end up with 50+% of prisoners who are neuro-different, because that's just unacceptable. So the reality is technology has been incredible. For me, I don't know where I'd be without technology because it helps me significantly work within an organization. It hides lots of the issues and challenges I face. But the future is going to be technology. My view is if you're neuro-different, you have the potential to ride the back of the robots into the future or to hold their controls. We can see this, it's evident. There are certainly superpowers within people who are neuro-different that work really well within the modern world of technology. And again, we just have to find ways to allow those people to be superheroes within those organizations. So, why are we hurting people in the hiring process and at work? So, when I was at university, I went as an exchange student, as I mentioned. I had a Tai Chi teacher. By the way, the only reason why I got into university is because I went into the arts. So that was my routine for starters. But my Tai Chi teacher and also my poetry teacher was a big inspiration and influence on me. And part of the reason being is when I first started going to poetry lessons, I could see that she was disconnected from me. And I only learned this years later. I didn't hand in work on time. Even though I was really fascinated by poetry, I struggled a bit. Well, finally, I got the work in. And what she said to me years later is, Theo, I realised the shift in my view of you as an individual, because before you weren't handing in work, you looked disconnected, you were all over the place. But when you did hand in work, the difference that I could see is you were the only person who went back to your work obsessively again and again and again to rework it and reimagine it. And she said nobody else was doing that. And I think, again, here's the signs of what somebody can offer that we need to realise. But for me, this was somebody who enabled me to realise I can shift the thinking of others. And I think we need to do a bit more work around helping individuals realise that they can do that, because otherwise, again, they become disconnected from society. So the way we look at people who are neuro-different, often, I like to use Jekyll and Hyde as an example of, in some respects, we see them as this incredible person, who highly intelligent, can do incredible work, they're a doctor, they're a scientist, whatever they may be. But on the flip side, we then talk about them being this negative person. They want to hide away in a corner. They want to find a space away. They're affected by noise and sound. And I think this is the challenge when I speak to people and listen to people, managers who are struggling with it. It's kind of this Jekyll and Hyde mentality of they can kind of see what the person has to offer, but they keep getting pulled back to seeing them as this Mr. Hyde. And I think, again, we need to find ways of educating people to shift them from this thinking. So, again, we're creating our environments. We've done this for accessibility for people in wheelchairs, right? We made it We made the world, the built environment, it was inaccessible, right? If you were in a wheelchair, you couldn't get anywhere. You were stuck at home. But now we've done the same. We've done the same for people who are neurodifferent. We've made our environments inaccessible for them. We've made it difficult for them to step in. You know, we have an individual who has a great mind, but because they struggle to get into the centre of town every day for 5 days a week, they're not good enough for us. We can't have them. Even though the work they can do is incredible. Sorry, we're not going to change our systems and processes for you, no matter how good you are. And the reality is, where else do they go? Because lots of organisations structure themselves in this way. So we have to be brave. We have to think about how we can shift the dial on this. So the way I like to think about it is Superman. So we all want superhuman powers. We all want Superman within our organisation. Right? Superman can shoot lasers through metal. He can fly. He can do incredible things. We get so excited. Hey, we just interviewed Superman. He's going to join us. But the minute Superman gets into the organisation, we fill the organisation with kryptonite, right? There's kryptonite everywhere. And kryptonite doesn't need to be there. The kryptonite's just been there for a long, long time. So nobody's brave enough to get rid of that kryptonite. Nobody's willing to go, hang on, I think the reason why Superman's going a bit crazy is because we've got these systems, these processes. We've got this kryptonite. Can we just remove it? Can we just, like, ensure that Superman doesn't have to work with kryptonite? And again, I think we have to be brave about this, and we have to challenge people, and we have to call them out and say, listen, you can do this. We can shift the way that we work. We can change our processes. We can change the way that we interview people. So another example that I've written about is, you know, we've created this rat race that everybody has to fall into. The whole world that we live in is now this rat race. Yet we have dolphins, but they're never going to survive. They're never going to perform within our environments if we always try and force them through a maze that's been designed for rats. So we just have to give it some thought and consideration. So what can we do? So if we look at autism as an example of solving mathematical problems, what we can see is people who are autistic can have incredible superpowers. And, you know, let's be honest here, it's not everybody, and we can define what a superpower is. But there's extremes that exist within people who are neurodifferent that don't tend to exist so much in people who are atypical. And we have to take that into consideration. So, you know, Microsoft is a wonderful example. We've got to be careful because Microsoft, a big organization, they can isolate these programs. But they talk about people with autism having mad skills. And they can show, you know, they can show tangible benefits and increase business performance by hiring people who are neurodifferent. And when we think about people in history, you know, we look at Alan Turing. You know, it's a prime example of somebody who was disrespected in his time. You know, nobody really valued him at that moment. The people who worked with him found him difficult. I don't know whether you've seen the film, and I think that is a really good example by an actor of somebody who's struggling with an environment, who's autistic, and where his peers don't understand him or don't know how to support him, and are constantly looking at his weaknesses, as defined weaknesses rather than his strengths. So I think Alan Turing is an incredible example of somebody we did not understand and we did not respect, and in the end he took his own life. ADHD waits for no one. So for me, this is, you know, I feel this every day. You know, I'm not hanging around for what's happening next. I'm off. I'm jumping off the next cliff. You know, it's how I live. It's how I exist. But we've got to understand that about people, and we've got to provide them with the environment where they can feel that that's okay and they can express themselves and not try and pin them down to a chair. You know, great examples are Facebook. So, you know, they've redefined this slightly now, but, you know, they're an organisation that wants to move fast and break things. Now, I've broken most of my bones in my body. I've had stitches in my eye, in my tongue, in my lip, all over the place. And often this is because my brain works in a way that I just go. Now, there's risks associated with just going. But there's organisations that can benefit from people who just go. And Facebook, I think, is a brilliant example of, you know, for me, this is defined, move fast and break things by ADHD. So we talk about the Microsoft Autism Program, and then we identify somebody who identifies has been ADHD and possibly autistic, who knows. But we can already see now that the leading organisations within technology, Alan Turing, who effectively started the development of computers as we know it now, artificial intelligence, Alan Turing was the key guy that allows us to be in the position where we are with technology. And we've got to think, if we don't open up our environments to these people, they will find ways to achieve incredible things. But they could be achieving incredible things within our organisations, not outside of our organisations. So dyslexia. For me, dyslexia has always been around seeing around the problem. You know, my wife will always work through a problem. She'll see a problem, she'll work through the problem. I'll always see a problem and think around how I get around the problem. Because naturally, if you can't spell a word, and you need to spell the word, you'll think of different words to spell. If you can't write a sentence in a way that somebody wants you to write it, you think of a different way. If you can't read properly, you think of a different way to express yourself. So what you then get is the strength within somebody who's dyslexic is to see around problems. Now, you need people who see through problems, because otherwise you'll miss important things. But you absolutely, within teams, need people who see around problems. So how can you identify people with dyslexia within your organisation and partner them up with the right people, with those people who combine together can do incredible things? So, you know, Branson, love him or hate him, is an example of somebody who is happy to describe himself as dyslexic. And, you know, if you think around the creativity and the way that he's seen around problems, and often this is through creating, you know, different types of transportation, different drinks, different ways of travelling, whatever it may be. It's just a great example of seeing around a problem and fixing it with a solution. So these people can be quite entrepreneurial, but they can exist within organisations. They don't need to be outside of organisations. So, I mean, this is, I guess, I've come here and I could give you a list of a million things that you can consider and do. But, you know, recruitment processes can be a potential barrier to neurodiversity. So simple solutions, you know, offering multiple application methods, don't assess somebody in a way that is completely off the chart in comparison to what they're going to do. You know, this is why organisations are now using Lego or Jenga or a wide variety of ways to test people who are testers or developers or whatever it may be, finding alternative ways to test people and assess them. And avoid ambiguous job adverts. I mean, the problem is it's difficult to update these things. You see all the time these job adverts that have lasted for 100 years because nobody wants to touch them because that means they've got to ask somebody if they can change them. So they just don't change. But the problem is, not only are we not actually expressing what the job's about, because it's what the job was about 100 years ago, but actually we're making it really difficult to be inclusive. Because, you know, people who are neurodifferent, they need the job to be explained to them in a different way. They need it to be clearer. They need bullet points to help them get through the information. So we need to just think about the way that we structure, the way that we communicate with people. And don't shove them in a fishbowl. You know, I find this difficult because we have glass wall office rooms as well. But you've got to think around where you're putting people within the interviews. You know, are they facing a busy office? You know, have you given them a glass of water? Is there a toilet that they can use? These are simple things that any human being requires, right? But it can have a huge impact on somebody who's neurodifferent. Or there's loads of other stuff that's going on in their head, right? The environment is like... And they're trying to focus themselves to come in into the interview and perform. And the minute they come in, they don't look you in the face. They've got all these things impacting upon them. You've made a decision with 150 milliseconds, and out the door they go. And the 84% stat continues. So we need to really think about the way our environments are structured, even if it's just when we invite people in and how we engage with them. And stay away from bright lights and loud noises, and never feed me after midnight. Is the other thing. But one final thing. So what I've tried to talk about today is what's a passion for me, what's quite important. It's not too much data and information and you know, structure around what you need to go and do. Because I think what I'm hearing from everyone I'm speaking to is people are getting excited by this, the boards are getting interested, but when it comes to actually implementing something, they come into a stop. Nothing's happening. So, you know, I throw up a few ideas around the recruitment process, what you can do. The reality is a bigger shift needs to happen. And that's the shift within organisations. And for me, it's around seeking first to understand, then to be understood. So what we need to do is we need to go back into our organisations, We need to facilitate and support those people who identify as being neurodifferent, those people who want to be advocates, and we need to open up the conversation. And this is no different to D&I generally, you know, right? We get groups of people that can start to talk around how that organisation, how that environment is affecting them. Once we understand that, we can start to solve some of those problems. Some of them will be simple, some of them will be complex, some of them will need investment. But if we go back, if the only thing we commit to is to go back to our organisation, to sit around the table, understand what the challenges are within our environment, and then give our people a platform to express themselves, to know they're not going to be victimised, and to know they're not going to face losing their job, because this is a big fear. And once they know that, and we've offered them the support, then the organisation will become a better place, we'll have a better understanding, hiring managers will get it, and then we can go out and we can do the attraction, and we can get more people into the organisation. So, thank you for your time. If you have any questions, let me know. But that's me.